we would much rather be talking about a win right now when the Clemson Tigers took the field against LSU this past Saturday. But things did not work in our favor, and we're going to dive into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Grayson, I kind of want to just kick things off. It's very simple. I mean, as far as what we saw on Saturday, there were certainly a lot of reactions considering the expectations heading into the season, and just the performance. It wasn't quite what any of us expected. I think we all were kind of. I think my final score prediction was like 34-27. So I didn't give either defense enough credit, and I gave both offenses too much credit in a lot of ways. But what did you see from this game, and kind of your takeaways? And are the fans, is the media, is everybody overreacting about this loss and what it means for this program this season?
Well, I was kind of shocked. I think where I looked and started with is usually not the local or even the fan local reaction. Sort of what is everybody saying outside the program? I think we got a pretty good confirmation today of nationally where people still view Clemson, and that's as a top 10 team, sitting at 8 in the AP poll. I know it doesn't really carry as much weight now with the college football playoff rankings, but we sat there Saturday night. You try to decipher what happened on the field, and my biggest takeaway was that once again in a really big game against the big dogs of the SEC, and particularly that big competition that you're going to probably want to see in January, kind of the measuring stick, it was halftime, and Clemson's up 10-3, had the 2 turnovers, felt like Tom Allen's defense was playing really well, and spoke to a couple people feeling like, okay, this was the moment Clemson was waiting for. And you're up 10-3, you have the ball to start the second half, you've won the turnover battle. All these years, 2022, 23, even 2024, it felt like it was on the opposite end for Clemson, where they were the ones chasing that moment, struggling to keep on holding on to the football. And here, lo and behold, they had an opportunity and it was squandered, and you're outscored 14-0 in the second half. LSU walks into your house. Death Valley was a big conversation point throughout August, and you come up short. So I understand there's disappointment. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of why. But I think at the end of the day, Clemson fans were sort of hoping for that extra oomph and proof of progress with this team because, to be fair, they have been a media darling, and me specifically has been part of that. Felt like the team was trending in the right direction. They were moving the way I think that they should have been. And overall, a couple things I was disappointed in that we'll get into tonight. But I think the world isn't over. The season is still attainable within your goals. So that's a positive. And there are some positives on the field, certainly, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, it's a mystery. It really is. And I think Garrett Riley, in his biggest games with Clemson, it felt like the playbook is pretty tiny. And it have some criticism and some questions about how he moves forward in year 3. But again, it's not the end of the world. Clemson still has a chance to win their conference, make the college football playoff, which I think they will. But we'll talk about kind of where they stand nationally, in my eyes, I'm sure, here pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with that, let's just kind of dive into it. I mean, you talked about the offense because I think that's really where the conversation starts with that loss. I mean, didn't even crack 300 yards of offense, 31 rushing yards on 20 attempts or 19 attempts, whichever it was. Just a pretty anemic performance on all fronts. And, you heard Dabo, kind of not mince words, kind of in rare form for him today in terms of just how, unabashedly critical he was of the performance and how that he welcomed the outside criticism. He said, y'all can go ahead and say it. Cade Klubnik sucks. Garrett Riley sucks. All of that, that's language you don't typically hear. I mean, and when he has the rare times he has talked like that, it's usually been a week where he's been ripping into everybody behind the scenes too. So, this was a very, very kind of telling moment, I think, for, what his opinion of that performance was and what he expected going into that game. So as far as, progression and where we go from here, because I think there were multiple, facets of that game offensively that just did not play up to snuff. Where does it start, do you think, with this team? Was it the offensive line? Was it Cade himself? Was it Garrett Riley in the play calling? Obviously we can say like all three of those things and more were contributors, but where do you think the genesis of everything needs to start with as far as getting this offense on track?
Yeah, and I'd love to start with Dabo today. He was on fire. It was rare form, as you mentioned, where he wasn't holding much back. And usually he is Mr. Optimist. He is very positive, and depending on who you ask, that's either a great thing or it's usually a pretty poor thing. And today he was not holding back and was saying that the play calling need to be better, that Klubnik, a quarterback that he spent a majority of 2 years ago defending in worse performances than Saturday's. And so you've kind of seen the standard of this offense, and particularly Garrett Riley, and I'm sure conversations behind closed doors, those two understand that Saturday's performance can't happen if Clemson needs to get to go to where they want to, which is the national championship. But I think the problems on offense stem from the run game or the lack thereof, and you can blame the play calling, but I think up front, this team really just got handled. Tristan Lee, Blake Miller, particularly on the edges, it felt like it was a losing battle from the start. I just remember that one of the first plays, you saw Patrick Payton line up against Tristan Lee, and my rewatch confirmed it. It just was all five of Clemson's offensive linemen were thoroughly handled. It was not a great day for anybody. Maybe the interior, I felt like Sadler got better as the game went along, but still, I think your blind side in Lee was your biggest trouble point. And for Klubnik, that side of the ball all night, whether that was not picking up IDs on blitzes, and you got to give Blake Baker a ton of credit. He has transformed that LSU defense that couldn't stop a nosebleed a few years ago, and now was shutting down one of the more prolific offenses in college football last year. So I think it starts there, and Adam Randall touching the ball last to start the second half is pretty unacceptable if you're a Clemson fan, and we've talked about it on this show, where Sweeney, Garrett Riley, Cade Klubnik, all these different characters, all these different cast of characters have said, man, Randall has been a force this summer. We got to get him the ball in space, and it felt like Clemson didn't do that enough. And whether that is picking up blocks with the running backs, whether it's the linemen just not able to hold a gap, Clemson can't run the ball with the running backs the total of 9 times and feel like LSU is going to respect that. They have to be more than one-dimensional, and that was their big problem last year against Texas, SMU, and South Carolina. Phil Maffa couldn't run the football because he was broken injury-wise, and so this team kind of reverted back to its old habits and its old sins. And so Brian Kelly said it best Saturday night, if you're one-dimensional, you're pretty easy to defend, and trusted his corners to go out there on an island with some pretty elite talent with Clemson here. Obviously, losing Antonio Williams hurts, and you expect them back here soon. But overall, Clemson's run game and offensive line has to be better. It'll be kind of this domino effect. If that can be fixed, I think Klubnik, it's not all on him. He obviously has to play a lot better, but I think at the end of the day, it starts up front, and the run game has to get better.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Grayson, you kind of hit it on the head there. I think it started, much like I said, entering the game. When me and Jordan were breaking down this game last week on the All In show, I said in big games like this, where you have comparable talent all over the field, it's about what happens in the trenches. It's about what happens in the game within the game, and whoever wins the line of scrimmage is going to win this game. And that proved to be true. I just didn't expect for LSU to be the one to win the line of scrimmage, and they did. They thoroughly beat Clemson's offense. I think that was one of the more shocking performances for me, just watching the game back, was how bad our offensive line did against that LSU pass rush. And, we gave them credit going into the game. We knew LSU was going to pressure Cade. We knew that their defensive line was retooled and much better, and they looked to right the wrongs of last season. But, man, they did it in a much bigger way than I thought. And our offensive line really had no answers all night. And, to further go into that, Garrett Riley really didn't have any answers. It did not look like to me that Clemson made any adjustments on offense whatsoever to try to combat the rush that was clearly overwhelming the offensive line each and every play. I think Cade Klubnik was pressured on, or they blitzed on like 56% of the downs. They got home like 40%. I mean, Cade Klubnik was running for his life all night. And then you saw towards the end of the game, even on that last play, we had a wide open wide receiver, but he was seeing ghost at that point. And there were times later in that game where you saw Cade Klubnik escaping a pocket that didn't need escaping and kind of causing some of his own pressure at times. And I think that just stemmed from early on in the game, the offensive line just getting thoroughly whipped by LSU.
Yeah, one of the things that was fascinating was you kind of mentioned adjustments there. And I took note of this early in the game is that LSU, obviously going into it, they've heard all August for sure that guys like TJ Parker, and they had the kind of the joke there with the tackling dummies, which to Brian Kelly's credit, he led the troops, and they've heard a lot of criticism on that front, and they were able to get it done. But you have the TJ Parkers, the Peter Woods, even the new addition in Will Helt. Those guys are going to get to the quarterback at some point. And LSU ran a lot of screens, a lot of quick throws for Nussmeier to really get him comfortable, especially because you got 80,000 fans screaming at you. The offensive line's not going to be able to hear as much. It's okay, let's get the ball out quick. Let's negate Clemson's pass rush entirely and make it to where they got to beat us on the outside. And for the most part, Clemson rose up to the challenge, but it was able to give LSU a little bit extra of a dimension offensively. And at times, Riley had it, and I felt like he had kind of figured it out at points, whether it was kind of putting Tyler Brown at a sort of gadget spot at running back or TJ Moore on some counter sweeps, some quick throws. And there were times where Klubnik just wasn't seeing those quick throws. And usually with those big blitzes, you're going to have to throw to the spot where, whether it's an incoming DB, linebacker, that spot's going to be open. And they were, and Klubnik wasn't hitting it. So I think it's a healthy mix of both, where Riley certainly deserves some of the blame, but at the same time, this is one of Klubnik's worst performances in recent memory. I feel like he played better in the Georgia game. They were just kind of overwhelmed on a talent standpoint. You made a great point, too, is that when Clemson's kind of been on even playing field, these small plays and moments have been the thing that's been their biggest demon. And again, that was not exercised on Saturday night. It's certainly I think a big issue with this group when it comes to how great can they truly be. Even if they do roll through the ACC, that lingering thought of, okay, when the rosters are equal, what happens?
Absolutely. And I think, you just kind of touched on kind of what I think was the most stark difference in that game was kind of the coordinator matchup. And it wasn't even really the coordinator matchup because, the offensive coordinators aren't coaching against each other. But we saw the difference in Joe Sloan's play calling and kind of his game plan for making Clemson's defense, uncomfortable. And when they did get stops, they had to work for it. I mean, you saw the different formations that they were running. I mean, that the Xavier Thomas like orbit motion into pistol and then handing it off to him and running this like a zone type, like that's really cool. I mean, like if you're an offensive head and you love, watching, creative offense, like that was really cool. I mean, yeah, they didn't have a generational offensive output, but it was enough to make Clemson's defense, have to work. They have to use their eyes and give them a lot to look at. That's one of the things with Garrett Riley's scheme that, coming in, we thought we would see more of, but there doesn't seem to be that amount of creativity or versatility in the scheme. I mean, we saw it a little bit. I mean, I liked some of the jet motions and the hand. I think Tyler Brown and TJ Moore got handoffs on like reverse and sweeps, but kind of building off of that, like there were like it seemed like LSU's game plan was a lot more like in terms of sequencing of plays and all that, and giving Clemson the same look multiple times, but running different things out of it. Like that was kind of the biggest difference, and it made things a lot more difficult, whether it was motioning an H back across the formation and then countering to the opposite side, like things like that, like we didn't see that enough from Clemson. And that it made, like Brian Kelly said in his press conference, it made Clemson predictable. And when you're not, committing to running the football like LSU did, they didn't run for 1,000,000 yards, but 31 rushes for 108 yards is much better than 20 for 31. And it at least makes the defense have to respect it. So I think that's one of the things that, moving forward with this team, if we're going to see Clemson reach the potential that we think this team still has, I think we got to see more of that. And it also it's got to start with Cade. He's got to make the layups, because he didn't make the layups either. So that it goes hand in hand.
It's interesting with LSU. There's so much eye candy, and with all these NFL scouts there too. I'm sure they're watching and going, man. I kind of look at this as kind of a fun analogy that someone threw at me. It's Clemson's offense and Garrett Riley's offense on Saturday. It's like you're watching a good movie, like a 6 out of 10. and you have some good ideas in there. So maybe there's a really good character in there, but you leave it kind of wanting more. Man, I wish they would expound more on that scene or that plot. And then watching LSU's offense and those spurts and those drives, all those motions, different adjustments, it's like watching a great film. You come out there going, when's the sequel coming out? Can't wait to see more of that. Can't wait to see what they do in October. There's so many good building blocks there. So Clemson's offense, I think at times, I think Garrett Riley's got it. I do think it's in there somewhere. It's just a matter of whether they trust it. They're willing to throw it out there in those big games because it's there. I do think there are some ideas that maybe make me sit there and go, I haven't seen that before. It's pretty creative. It's cool. Even just from a pure football fan standpoint, I'm watching that. And Tyler Brown, running back, it's kind of cool. Let's see how that goes. Or TJ Moore in a counter motion. That's interesting. That's a good counter to what LSU's been running here. And you just don't see it enough. Or I was expecting a lot of screens to Adam Randall. Maybe some cross screens in the area of the blitzes. Riley sees a lot of blitzes coming up the middle. Let's see if we can get Randall to, or maybe even a pop pass, what they kind of ran in the past. So those are just ideas. And obviously, I'm not trying to imply that I know more than Garrett or the Clemson staff. Sweeney has challenged us media folks to say that they all suck. So maybe that's what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And maybe Sweeney will be like, I'm doing a great job there. Throwing some more gasoline on the fire. That's great. But he was on fire today.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Dabo's interview today, and certainly, like you and Jordan mentioned earlier, he was in rare form. You don't quite hear him talk about his team in the fashion that he did today, or his coaching staff for that matter. You can tell that he was thoroughly irritated with the play calling, with the abandonment of the run. I think he mentioned that more than once in his press conference today about, we just completely abandoned the run. And, he was pretty frank about Cade Klubnik's play and that he had a bad game. He did not play well at all. He missed plays that were there, as you mentioned. You've mentioned a couple of them, Grayson, so far in the interview. He missed some wide open guys. And a lot of it had to do to the pressure. And then a lot of it had to do with, him going back to some of those bad habits that Cade has displayed before, not so much last season, but the season prior with the happy feet in the pocket and trying to escape a pocket that doesn't necessarily need to be escaped. But I did want to mention one thing about the defense that not concerning, but something to watch, right?
Okay.
I think they played a really good game against LSU. And I think LSU has an extremely explosive offense. And anytime you can hold an offense to 17 points like Clemson's defense did, especially being on the field for 37 plus minutes of a game, they played extremely well. But the one thing that I saw is they were still getting gashed on the ground a little too often. There were times where LSU was having a little too much success and getting some of those explosive runs on the ground. So although that run defense has obviously improved, still some work to do there.
Yeah, I think work to do there is the right term. And I think if you had told, let's say you guys are tailgating and I walk up and I say, I'm from the future and Clemson's going to hold LSU tonight to 17 points and they're going to force 2 turnovers, I think the entire surrounding tailgates would be like, oh my gosh, how many points are we going to win by tonight?
Yeah.
Like,
what
wow.
Are we winning by, 14, 21?
I think you'd feel really good about it. And in Sweeney's, one of his best quotes today was the only offseason narrative that stuck was that Tom Allen's legit. And that hype is real. And I do think that, and we talk about equal footing, Clemson's not going to play a team that's on its level roster-wise for some time. Right. Georgia Tech does worry me if you're a Clemson fan. But overall, I think until maybe now November or late October, Belichick may throw something weird out there. But based off of what we saw last night, I don't know.
Yeah,
that was quite the mess. But anyways, I do think that this defense is going to be very special. And with Tom Allen, the tackling was a lot better. I know they had some whiffs, and you do usually in these games. But for Clemson, that felt like a game last year that would have been a little bit more uglier and would have probably looked more like the Georgia game in 2024, where that defense was out there pretty similarly to where they were in Atlanta. They were out there the whole time. The offense couldn't get things going, and the resiliency, the tackling, the situational. LSU may get a play on them, but they're not going to – they've bent, but they're not going to break. Yeah. And they had some of that Allen characteristics in there. More the person that I'm most excited to see continue to grow is Ronan Hannafin. I mean, what a player.
Yeah.
Somebody that's still learning the position. Me and Facts and Childress of the Roar, I got to credit him for this, calls him a straight gangster. The way he plays football, just gets after it.
Yeah.
And so another player that I think fits that Tom Allen mold of just football sicko. And so this is a team that defensively I think is going to create some havoc. And so that may be the strength of your team until this offense figures it out. But I think overall, if you had to point to something, and that's your hope, is that, man, Tom Allen's defense, it's gonna be legit. If this is the starting point, then I think the possibilities are pretty endless.
And look who you started against. You didn't start against a bunch of bums. Like,
yeah, Sweeney did say in January that you're going to find out what Tom Allen's made of when they hired him. And so I think we know what he's made of.
100%. Grayson, before I let you go, you touched on the defense. You hit on a couple of guys. Is there anybody else on defense? Let's end on a positive note that stood out to you on Saturday that really kind of you expect to see more of going forward?
I think one of the chief concerns last year for Clemson was across the defensive line in terms of depth. Guys like Vic Burley, Stephylan Green, Jaheim Lawson probably weren't ready for that amount of playing time. You had Lawson start a game against Florida State. Cade Denhoff started a lot of games last year. Felt like that was their weakest area, was the depth behind guys like Peter Woods, TJ Parker, DeMonte Capehart. When he was healthy, you just kind of crossed your fingers. But man, the development from some of those guys, Stephylan Green was excellent. Vic Burley was excellent. Jaheim Lawson was excellent. That camp advertisement, that hype was as advertised. And that's a group that I'm very high on, that you can rotate NFL guys in. You got NFL guys coming out there as well to pick up the slack. And so I think for Sweeney, that patience, at least on that part and that front, they're going to get a lot of love this year from me. And against LSU, it's one of those things too where they weren't dominating Furman on Saturday. They were playing really well against an LSU offensive line that's going to be pretty good this year. I think a lot of people expect that. And so to see your backups play really well and contribute solid reps will help as well. I think we expect them to be good, but obviously you never know how it translates. It was good on Saturday. So Clemson's defensive line, it's going to be pretty good, and it's going to be deep.
Absolutely, man.